leadership problems were primarily skill problems, most trainings would fix organizations, but it doesn't. Capable, credentialed, experienced leaders still create confusion, friction, and disengagement, often without even realizing. And that should make us pause because it tells us that something deeper than skill is at work. To understand why this keeps happening, we need to look underneath the surface of leadership problems. But first, welcome to LTR HUB Marketplace Edition. This channel focuses on leadership development, communication clarity, and team alignment in real world and work environments. With that being said, let's get into today's topic. So, if we're going to make some sense of persistent leadership breakdown, we need to ask a more precise question than what skills are missing. The real question isn't whether leaders are skilled, the question is what's operating underneath their skill. This video is the first in a short foundational series built around one central idea. The leader is the first system. And until that system is understood, no external system, whether it's strategy, structure, process, or policy, will function well for very long. So let's dive into the skill myth. Most organizations default to skill-based diagnosis. When something breaks down, the instinct is predictable and often well-intentioned. We say people need better communication skills, leaders need better management skills, teams need better collaboration skills. And to be clear, skills matter. Skills are visible, they're measurable, they're teachable. They give organizations something concrete to invest in and something tangible to point to. But what most leaders experience in practice is this. Even after skills improve, many of the same problems persist. Miscommunication continues, tension remains, rework increases, and people disengage quietly. And when that happens, leaders often feel confused. Because on paper, things should be working. Everyone is trained. Everyone is now capable. Everyone understands their role. Yet something still feels off, which tells us something very important. Skill is not the root system. Skill is actually just an amplifier, and here's the distinction most organizations miss. Skills amplify whatever system that they're plugged into. So if awareness is strong, skills accelerate clarity. But if awareness is weak, skills don't solve dysfunction. It actually makes the dysfunction louder. It makes misalignment faster, and it makes tension more efficient. It makes confusion more sophisticated. So you don't get fewer problems, but you get more complex ones. Let's take a moment, and I want you to think about a team where you worked on that everyone was fully capable. There was smart people, experienced people, well-trained people, but yet things felt harder than they needed to be. Not because people were incompetent, but because they lacked something underneath wasn't aligned. That something is rarely skill. So let's look at the leader as a system. So if skill isn't the root issue, what is? Leadership doesn't start with strategy, it starts with the leader. Before a leader touches a system, they introduce themselves into it. Every leader brings something into the environment, whether they intend to or not. They bring emotional patterns, decision defaults, communication habits, stress responses. These things don't show up on organization charts or performance reviews, but they shape the environment just as powerfully as any policy. People don't experience leadership in theory, they actually experience it through behavior. And behavior creates an environment. This is why leaders can operate in the same organization, the same policies, the same goals, the same resources, and produce very different outcomes. It's not because one is smarter, not because one is more committed, but because one shows up differently. Leadership is not neutral. Presence shapes the system before direction ever does. Teams don't wait for the instructions to start responding to a leader. They begin responding the moment a leader enters the room, when they join the meeting, or they send the message. Think about a leader who made work harder than it needed to be. Not because they were malicious, not because they were unqualified, but because their presence, especially under pressure, created tension, uncertainty, or confusion. They may have cared deeply, they may have worked hard, they may have even meant well, and yet the environment felt heavy. So I want you to ask yourself, was the problem really skill, or was it that their internal system was shaping the external one? This is what it means to say that the leader is the first system. Now let's go into self-awareness as leadership responsibility. So this brings us to self-awareness, and it's often misunderstood. Self-awareness in leadership is not introspection, it's not personality analysis, it's not navel gazing. Self-awareness is operational clarity. It's knowing how you show up, especially when stakes are high as a leader. It's understanding how your internal patterns become external experiences for others. This includes how you default when things are calm, and how you respond when pressure increases, and how your intent is actually experienced by the people around you. This is where behavioral tools can be helpful when used correctly. They don't explain who you are, they don't label you, they don't excuse behavior, they actually just reveal patterns. They help leaders like you and I to see how we show up in real situations, particularly under stress. And stress is where leadership is most clearly revealed. There are 3 awareness domains that every leader is responsible for. First, our default behavior. How do I tend to lead when things are going well? Second domain, stress behavior. How do I change when pressure increases, timelines tighten, or stakes rise? Finally, the third domain, impact versus intent. What do people experience regardless of what I meant? Most leadership problems don't come from bad intent. They come from unexamined impact. Leaders are often leaders are often surprised by the environment they create, not because they don't care, but because we've never been required to look clearly at ourselves as a system. And that is not a personality issue, it's a leadership responsibility. As you reflect on this, consider what clarity or adjustment may be needed in your leadership or communication. The goal isn't perfection, it's awareness, alignment, and follow through. If this was helpful, you're welcome to subscribe and like at LTR Hub. Thank you for watching the first episode in this series, The Leader is the First System. Be on the lookout for leadership presence, why people respond before you speak.